All right, now we're getting to a part of the series that's getting a little bit more dense, and that is we're going to be implementing a couple of handlers again for logging in and signing up users. Now, this is a part that you may not actually be doing at all. I would recommend using a library or a tool out there, even like auth0 or hosting your own with something like Hydra or a tool of that nature. But if you are wanting to build a really simple application, like a backyard pizza ordering platform, what you will be needing to do is some of these steps. And these will show you sort of a framework of where you could kind of build out from, adding in different levels of security, different levels of robustness, and handling errors in a better way. Those are all pieces for you to layer on depending upon your individual needs. This is going to show you a pattern. The pattern will hold up in production. The individual implementation details won't. So this is something for you to be able to look at. Again, this would work totally fine for a hobby project, but this is something that you'll want to bear in mind, that things like refresh tokens would be important for a more critical application, and really to bear that in mind before we go into this too much more. So to begin with, what we need to do is actually define a couple of new variables that we're going to go ahead and put into our project. So you'll recall that our Vercel application is currently, we've pulled environment variables from our external project. We're going to now add a couple of environment variables from local here to our cloud version using the CLI. And then we're going to just make sure those are in sync with our local environment variables locally. That will allow us to be able to keep our deployment in sync and not be sort of introducing a break in our logic. To do that, we're going to go ahead and start with using the vc command here. And we're going to say vc env add. And we're going to give it a name here. We're going to add in our Hasura JWT secret key, as well as our Hasura JWT secret type. So we're going to go ahead and pass in the secret type first. And then it's going to go ahead and say, yeah, what's the value that you want to pass in? And we're going to go ahead and pass in the value that we want to use. We're going to be using HS256. And we're going to go ahead and tell it that we want to use all of these environments. We can definitely split these up. We could have a production versus a development. Those are all good practices to do. It's not something that we're going to be worrying about for this series, but you can see there that it is very possible to do that. And now we're going to go ahead and do another one. So we're going to say vc add env, or vc env add, pass in our secret key. Now this is not going to be a super secret key, because this is one that appears in basically all of the demos. Again, you should definitely make up a different one, but this is a generic HS256 secret key, and you should really change it. Please take that warning to heart. Okay, we're going to go ahead and put this all in the location we need, and we're going to go ahead and pull those environment variables now back down. vc env pull. And we're going to go ahead and dump those into our .env.local. I'm going to actually do this in a two-step process because I don't want to overwrite my my .env.local file. I want to go ahead and just put this in sort of a special copy here. And so from here, I'm going to go ahead and hide the screen. So now I have those environment variables synchronized between my front-end host and my local front-end copy. What I need to do now is to emulate what that behavior would be with Hasura itself. So to do that, I'm going to go inside of this Docker Compose file, and we're going to go ahead and add in those same environment variables here underneath the environment variables. And I'm going to go ahead and first grab in the secret type. And we're going to go ahead and call this again the HS256. And we're going to go ahead and pass in the not type again. We're going to pass in the actual key itself. And again, that key is this extremely secret string that we have there. Okay, so with that being done, we're going to go ahead and actually reboot our Hasura instance here. And with that being done, we're going to go ahead and we'll go back into the Hasura instance and restart the console, passing in the admin secret. And we should be back up and running, and here we are. We're back inside. Okay, so what we have is we've added these environment variables, which are going to be important for us to be able to work with both in the local and cloud editions. We're going to introduce these now to the cloud console because these are going to be important to go ahead and add. So heading over to the environment variables, we're going to go ahead and populate those environments here. At the moment, there's no CLI tooling to handle this part. We're going to go ahead and just do this one for the secret key. We're going to pass in that same key that we were using. And then we're going to go ahead and pass in another environment variable. And in this case, it is going to be the type. So we have these now all created and added, and our console is going to just make sure those are all updated. And we should be up and running here within no time. Heading back to our local version though, now we can start identifying our actions that we want to go ahead and keep in sync. So we're going to need to be able to modify our user here. So we're going to go to our user model, or our friend model in this case. And our friend model needs to have an additional column, and that's going to be for their username, which will be a type of text. And this will need to be a unique value. And we're going to have to leave this as nullable for now until we go ahead and handle the edge case of our existing content. So we're going to not worry about that for the moment. We'll go ahead and hit nullable is okay. We're going to modify that in a second to switch that. And then we need a password field. And that one does not need to be unique because we don't want people guessing that there is a used password in our database. So we're going to go ahead and say this is simply all we need to do. And we would store this in a encrypted format. Okay, so we have those now created. We're going to go ahead and go to our username. And we're going to go to our data here, actually. So our friends, Peter, Paul, and Mary. We're just going to go ahead and modify their data. And username for Paul here is going to also be Paul. Okay, so we have our unique usernames created. We can go ahead and modify that field now to be a non-nullable field. And we'll go ahead and save that. And we should be good to go. Okay, so we have all this content done. Again, every time I'm modifying this, it's actually writing this metadata for me, so I don't have to actually run this stuff myself. I can actually just push this all into my repository. All right, what we're going to do at the next step is go ahead and actually create these API handlers that we're going to be able to point our code at. Before we do that, what we're going to need to do is create an idea of a JWT utility for us. So we're going to start with going into our utils folder here that we've been using. And we're going to make a new file here called JWT. I'll make that again. And this JWT code, what it's going to do for us, and we have an example here already created, and we need to add this JSON Web Token library here. So let's go ahead and do that. What this is going to do is it's just going to allow us to be able to implement the JWT signage that we're looking for. So we've got we're looking for that JWT secret type, which we have, and then we're just passing in the same value as if it's missing. The same thing again for the secret itself. So it's coming from the environment variable for us, but if it wasn't enabled, it would be these other ones. And so what we're doing is taking the JWT config, and we are going to go ahead and tell it that it's HS256. We will give our JWT an expiration of 10 hours, which is way too long for a JWT, but that's what we're going to use. And then we have the generate JWT params, and we're going to ahead and say, yeah, this is all fine. So this is taking in inputs that we're going to say other claims is going to be a record of string or an array of that. And yeah, so we're going to go ahead and have these roles added to the JWT, which will allow us to be able to associate the user role inside of our system, sort of an add-back model, where we're going to be able to then sign that payload and be able to ship that back to the client from our API handlers. Okay, so this is really minimal code. This is just a JWT function. What we're going to do now is head over to our API routes. And by convention, I find it helpful, this was a way that I was shown, I find it helpful to create folders here for the thing that they're doing for us. So in the case of a Hasura action, it's helpful to nest that inside of a subdirectory called actions. And so what we want to do from here is to go ahead and say new file. We're going to do a signup.ts first. And we're going to go ahead and bring in some ready-made code for us again here that I want to be able to use as a reference. And we've done this before. We've done this in the Hasura Super app a number of times when we've talked about that. And so this is all code that we kind of get shipped around pretty frequently. But I think it's really helpful for us to have a look at. So let's go ahead and bring in this code here. And we're going to strip out some of the pieces we don't need. So we're going to go ahead and remove everything from our cookie utility. We're not going to use. We're going to go ahead and bring in our JWT library there, and we're going to bring in the client, which we will recreate that here in just a moment, which is fine. So we'll leave that for the moment. I'm going to just comment this out for now so we can see which parts we're working with. We need bcrypt here so we can store our code encrypted. So we're going to go ahead and add that as well. And that will then be fixed. And so we have now coming down to our client, we're going to go ahead and just comment out all of this code here for right now so we can kind of have a look at what we're doing. So we come down, we get all of this done. We're going to remove this set cookie behavior. So we're not going to do anything with cookies for right now. We're just going to pass this back inside of the payload, which we're going to then handle inside of local storage and call that a day. Okay, so now we're back with our sign up example code that we just went ahead and worked with. And I want to do a quick walkthrough of what's actually happening here. This is code that I have copied from our Hasura Super app, which is just a great reference anyways for building applications. I've modified this a little bit for make it a bit more terse, a bit more understandable. It's all it's all there. You can find it all online too, and it'll be in this code example as well. But what we have here essentially is we've got a couple of utilities. So we've got the bcrypt library. We've got a UUID that we want to generate. We've got a custom-made client for just API routes. It's literally nothing other than just a client creation tool that only handles the edge case of passing in the admin secret. There's nothing fancy here. There's no cases of subscriptions happening or anything else. This is just a very minimal client that will always have the admin secret on there. And we have then our generate JWT code that we did a walkthrough on. And we have a little utility here called check message. It really is very minimal. What it does is it just has a look for specific messages that we want to potentially catch on a unique case. So we can say check the message for uniqueness violation, so we can know that we've got an issue when we were creating a user. These imports that I have commented out, we will write here in just a moment. These will allow us to actually create our users or friends in this case. And from there, all we're doing is we're taking in a username and password from the body that we're writing into our system, and we will go ahead and create a hash password from this from the password we're passing in, and we'll take then that password. So we're going to go ahead and actually create inserting a friend, and then we're going to pass in the hashed password, and we will go ahead and also give it. In this case, we're not going to do refresh token, so we can remove that off there. We're going to go ahead and give it just the token. We're not going to worry about refresh tokens for now. So we can even probably remove the UUID generator. When we create that user, we're going to go ahead and get a response back. So again, we're checking to see if there is a uniqueness violation. If there is, we'll return an issue that's not allowed. Otherwise, we're going to go ahead and return back the payload. And the payload is going to go ahead and we're going to generate a token for it. So we're going to use the generate JWT token function here, passing in the additional claim, which we talked about from the inputs of the Hasura user ID. So we're going to get the user ID that we're wanting to pass in. And then we're going to go ahead and return that status to the action handler. So this is all going to be sent back to Hasura, and then Hasura is going to forward this on to our client. It's a little bit of it makes more sense when we see it in action here, but this is essentially all that is happening here. So what we did is we've modified our user to handle the case of a username and a password. We're going to have to modify some of our code here because what we are working with specifically is the cases of we're working specifically with our, what we're going to have to watch out for is that we have used the name of the model of friend instead of user. So there will be some cases here we have to adapt our boilerplate code for, but I'm confident that we'll be able to do that. As a convention, what I like to do personally is I like to create another queries folder here inside of the API folder here. And anything that we prefix with an underscore inside of the Next.js API routes get ignored entirely. And this allows us to sort of say, these queries will only ever be used on API routes. And it sort of helps us kind of scope this concept of there's a backend world of API routes and queries and utilities, and there's a front end, and we can move the JWT code here to the utils. If you're using refresh tokens, it's actually helpful to have that shared, so we'll leave it in place where it is for now. But we have the queries folder, and to do that, we're going to go ahead and actually do our first insert user, and we're going to copy over some boilerplate code and test it out actually in our API Explorer. And so we're going to go ahead and pop this in here, and what we're going to do is now change this to insert friend1, and it's taking in a username and a password. We can go ahead and remove the refresh token because it's not something we support, and then we're going to go ahead and change this to insert friend, and we're going to remove that refresh token off because our model doesn't support that. So we have then the response of the ID and the username. This is now a valid query. There's no issues with this. We're going to go ahead and copy that back over to our code editor, and we're going to go inside of our queries. We're just going to call this insert friend. And we can go ahead and save this, and with that in place, we can run our codegen. And that's going to just generate that query for us. So we have a small issue on another query that I wrote that is not yet on camera. So we can see that the insert friend worked. Let's go ahead and actually have a look inside of our signup handler here. I'm going to uncomment this. And all of these are going to be unhappy with us for the moment. We're going to go ahead and back this out one level because that's not a correct path. So what we're going to do is instead of insert user one, we're going to go ahead and pull in our insert friend one, and we'll see that it actually did not get generated, and that is because if you go to our codegen file here, we'll see that we actually have this inside of a different path here. It's looking very specifically for those two paths. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually attempt to support this via a array syntax. And we're going to say, so the two possible locations are either there, or we're going to go ahead and say that it can also be inside of a queries folder that will be inside of the pages, API, queries, and that should now be supported. So let's go ahead and try running this. And we'll see that it found our insert friend one path. So we have that. Now we're going to go ahead and comment out these first two here. And we'll be able to start to uncomment our code here where we're wanting to be able to bring this in. I got a little bit of a code goof there. All right, so let's go ahead and uncomment our actual handler here and start to see what happens as we start to explore our code a bit. Okay. So we start off with the insert friend one mutation. We need to actually import all of these here. And so if we change all of these now to the friend word, and we're going to see where TypeScript really comes in to save the day here for us, because it's going to complain about the areas where we're calling something friend. So we can say we're passing in the insert friend one. We have the username and the password, which is going to be our hashed password to be created. And then we're doing that as a to promise. We're then waiting for the result. And we're going to say, okay, if result.error, okay, we're looking at for the uniqueness. Again, we talked about that. And we're going to come down here and say, okay, so if all that works, there's no issues. Now what we're going to do is actually try and pull the data off. In this case, it's supposed to be insert friend one. And we can see that TypeScript helped us there. It was looking at our API agreement and saying, oh, you're going to have a bad day if you try that. And we can come down here and we say, okay, this is going to be called user. If I were to switch this to now friend to keep the nomenclature similar, I can now say, okay, this should be friend as well. And this also needs to be friend. And we can now see that we're able to pass in that Hasura user ID. And so once we have the token created with that whole string there, we're able to now come down here as well. And we're going to say that the user ID is now friend ID. The username is the friend username. And the refresh token we can actually just pop off. We're not going to work with that at all. So we have the ID and the username are getting sent back to the action, which will be sent back to the client as well that is calling that API route. That is a signup handler. And as I suspected, we can actually remove the UUID here because we're not using refresh tokens. So we can go ahead and work with this for the moment. And we're going to now attempt to implement the same thing for login. So now that we've implemented the login logic, we're able to see that essentially what we're doing is we are taking in, again, the username and password, and we are now just checking if that user happens to exist. If it does, we are returning their username and stored password. And then we are using the compare function from the bcrypt library to check if that password matches the friend password. Taking that payload, if it's all valid, we're going to go ahead and pass that ID into the JWT generator and repeat the same thing we did with the signup, passing that back on to Hasura. And from there, we're able to now implement our actions to actually send these payloads to these action handlers. So the action handlers are in place. They will do what they're supposed to do. But now we need to go back to the Hasura side to be able to connect these actions. And what's great here is we're able to actually use the Hasura CLI from inside of an action handler that we're attaching to the Hasura CLI. So it's Hasura to action handler, back to Hasura for some logic, back into the action handler, and then back over to Hasura again with the finished up work that's being done. And this is how we handle logic. This is how we handle business logic or any kind of behavior we need to handle. It's through things like actions where we can do this orchestration with a lot of fine-tuned detail that otherwise would be pretty much locked off to us if we didn't have access to that. So we're going to now switch back over to the Hasura side to be able to implement these actions and be able to modify our payload a little bit so we can go ahead and do that. We're going to go ahead and actually cut this video here, and we will do the connection of these API handlers to the actions in the next video so this doesn't become too long, and I'll see you in the next video.